Hello everybody, welcome to your 10th Java tutorial. Now in this tutorial we're going to be talking about something called static functions, and what a function is a reusable block of code that will only execute when we call it. Without realizing it, we've been using functions in these entire tutorials. For example, we have the main function, which is basically a place that Java knows to start the program. But we can actually define our own functions, give them our own arguments, and our own sets of code that we want them to execute. Now, as you can see above, I have made my own function, which is called static void say hi, and all it does is it prints hi to the screen. Now you'll notice here there is a word that says static, and that basically means we don't need what's called an object to run this function. We can just run this function by itself, standalone. It is part of our class. And I'll be going into more detail about what that means in future tutorials. But for now, just think of it as a function that doesn't need anything else to run. Now, the way we call a function is we type in its name, followed by these brackets. Now sometimes there will be extra information in these brackets, but for now we'll just stick to this simple function and end the statement with a semicolon. So now when I hit run, the compiler is going to take this code, it's going to compile it, we're going to look for the main function, and we're going to execute the first thing inside our main function. With functions we can also do something called passing arguments. Now what arguments are information that we give the function so that it can use that information in a way that we tell it to. So as you can see, I've changed this function up here to take an argument which is a string, and we're going to call this argument word. And then when we get into the function, we're going to take the word and we're going to print it out. Now I've made a string down here called my word, and I've initialized it to the word bananas, and now we're going to call this function and we're going to give it my word, which equals bananas. So when this function runs, it says, okay, I'm expecting a string. Now while I'm in this function, I'm going to call that string word. And we've passed in bananas. So now we say system.out.println our word, which was bananas, and we print bananas to the screen. Now, another fundamental thing with functions is returning a value. Now, what that means is we'll have our function here, and after the function is finished, we might want to have a value at the end. So let's make a new static function, except this time it's not going to be void, it's going to give us back an integer value. So we're going to say that this is an integer function, and it's called double my age. And it's going to take a value which is an integer, and we're going to call that age. Now, what do we want this function to do? Well, we want to give it our age, and we want it to double our age. So we've passed in a value called age. So let's times that by 2. Age equals age times 2. So what this line does here is we take age, and we use the assignment operator, the equals. It equals age times 2. And now we're going to return age. So the key point of this function is that if we are returning something, we always have to have a return statement to tell the function exactly what we're returning. Now, what does return actually mean? Well, return means after the function has finished executing, we're going to be left with a value, and we have to do something with that value. So instead of a void function, which doesn't return anything, and it can just, say, print out something to the screen, or do something like that, and not be left with a value afterwards to be worked with, we can set this function to a variable. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, this is what I mean by that. We can say a new integer, int my age doubled, equals double my age, and my age is 23. So what this is going to do is, we have a new variable called my age doubled, and we're going to use this function to double my age. So let's pass in the value 23. We're going to go up here. It's going to say, okay, well age is 23 as we passed it down here. We're going to take that age, we're going to times it by 2, and then we're going to return that age, or in other words, we're going to store it in this variable here, my age doubled. So then, after that, let's say system.out.println my age doubled to get that value and print it to the console. And there you go, 46 is 23 times 2, so that worked, my age is doubled. Now that we've learned about that, this line here might become a little bit more obvious. The main function is a static function because it doesn't need to be attributed to any objects. And it's also a void function because once we're finished executing, we won't have anything to do with any values, so this function must return nothing, because after it's executed, we've finished the program. So that's some static functions. If it all sounds a little bit confusing, don't worry, it will become a lot easier. I struggled with functions when I was learning to program, and a lot of people do as well. Just stick to it, you're doing really well so far. So that's functions. Make sure you stick around for the next tutorial where I'm going to be talking about something called arrays.